afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our Careers Now Employer mentorship session, Navigating Workforce Challenges. We're going to look at insights and strategies for the future of food and beverage manufacturing. We're pleased to have with us for the session Kevin Elder, Project Manager and Government Relations Manager at Food Processing Skills Canada. On today's webinar, we'll dive into the latest workforce trends, including the role of young Canadians, new immigrants, and temporary foreign workers in the sector. And following Kevin's presentation, we'll do a Q&A. We're pleased to have Kevin Elder. Kevin Elder grew up in Alberta in California and has lived and worked all over the globe. He now makes his home in Ottawa. His introduction to food and beverage processing was as a vapor heat treatment facility manager at a mango plant in Australia. I'll let Kevin share that story. Kevin joined Food Processing Skills Canada in 2017 and has been leading the organization's labor market information insights since that time. So I think everybody will be thrilled to hear what Kevin's got to say today. We often get asked from our processor members, what's happening within the labor market? What are the trends? What are the average, salaries? What's happening there? So I think Kevin's going to be able to give us a good overview on that today. So with that, and also I'd like to welcome Luis Garcia from Meat and Poultry Ontario. Meat and Poultry Ontario are one of our partners at Careers Now, so welcome Luis as well. So with that, I will pass it over to Kevin.
All right, thanks, Jason. I'll just share my screen here, and while I'm doing that, I will hit the wrong button. There we go. Just to explain a little bit about the vapor heat treatment piece was the Sorry, I've got too many options for where to find the document. Oh, that's again hit the wrong button. Are you seeing my presentation now?
We do, Kevin.
Perfect. Yeah, just quickly, I was surprised to discover that there are countries in the world that do not have fruit flies. And so the vapor heat treatment was a 13-hour process to kill fruit flies and fruit fly larvae so that you could export fruit from Australia to Asia, where they don't have fruit flies. And so it was quite an interesting process, but not what I'm going to talk about today. So Food Processing Skills Canada is a national nonprofit based in Ottawa, and we deliver a wide range of programs that cover everything from e-learning and training to industry support, skilled workforce strategies, and there's plenty going on. I'll touch on a few of these as we get going. These are a number of our programs that we're running at the moment. We've got a few more that have launched that haven't even made it onto this slide yet. They only launched in the past couple of weeks. So there's always lots going on with Food Processing Skills Canada, and I'm happy to go through some of these in more detail if there's questions. So focusing on the labor market, I wanted to start off by touching on external factors that are affecting all of us that are outside of our control and just part of the environment that we have to deal with. And one of those things is perceptions of the sector. And so when you look at the general public, it's about 17% that would consider applying for a job in food and beverage manufacturing if it was located near them. You can see that for youth, Indigenous people, new Canadians, and unemployed people or people with a recent experience of unemployment, those numbers are all much higher. What is encouraging about this slide is that it was part of a survey that we conducted a few years ago, and we included a short video about what food and beverage manufacturing entailed, and nothing that was terribly specific to any one sector, but just to give them an idea of what modern manufacturing looks like. And we asked the same question again, and the percentages all went up by between 5 and 15%, depending on the group. So a little bit of education can grow that market, but it's also worth noting that when we did some targeted questions specific to seafood and meat processing, And for meat processing, the general public was only 9% were interested. So it varies within the range, but in almost every survey that we've done, the sort of highest marks that we've ever seen would be around 30 to 35% of people would consider a career in the industry. So that's sort of what's out there. So if there's 100 people in the room that you're hoping to recruit from, if you can get a third of them to apply, you're doing well. We'd done a similar study where we looked at the perceptions of different generations, and we gave them a whole bunch of different jobs to gauge their interest in. One thing that was interesting was that, again, food and beverage manufacturing came in about a third across the board, not really differentiating based on what generation was there. And every generation would rather work in food and beverage manufacturing than in auto manufacturing. And so it's certainly not the top choice amongst all the generations, but it's certainly not the bottom one either. And so, and then for baby boomers, they'd even rather work in food and beverage manufacturing than be a social media star. So there's that. This is a chart showing our population. And so this is all from the census. We did our projections based off the last census. And so when we looked at the projection of 42 million by 2030, we made that projection before we'd even hit 40 million, which we've already done. So I think we're growing faster than this as a country, but all of the growth is coming from immigration. The orange line at the bottom of the screen is the population that's aged 15 to 24. And I started this chart at 1996, but if I'd started at 1981, it would be just a continuation of that straight line, that youth used to make up a much larger share of the population than they do today. And so that puts a lot of pressure on people as they're trying to fill retirements, because there just isn't the youth coming through in the same volume given for how big the industry has gotten. This is a chart that I made just looking at the change in employer numbers. So businesses that are working in food and beverage manufacturing and employing people from before the pandemic to sort of after the pandemic, to see how our sector did. And when you compare every province and territory to the economy as a whole, most of them outperformed. Ontario was more than double the new number of food and beverage manufacturing employers. So despite the challenges facing the industry, we're succeeding. We're managing to find the people we need to keep the businesses open and to start new ones. And so to keep finding the people, you need to look at what you're doing. And I've called this innovative solutions, and the next slide isn't innovative at all, but it's just to let people know. So every time that I'm talking with people that aren't familiar with the industry, again, some of that perception challenge is that there's this idea that everyone is paying minimum wage and that it's not a good place to work. And so as you can see, that every iteration of a survey we've done where we've asked about wages, the average wage for the respondents has gone up, and we compare those. This was a national survey, and so we took each answer and then compared it to their province's minimum wage. And you can see that the average salary above minimum wage has also gone up. And these are wages not of all of the positions in the facility, but just a frontline starting wage. So someone coming in off the street with little to no experience, no educational attainment requirement. So the average for Canada was $18.14. I think the average for just the Ontario respondents was quite similar. Ontario establishments make up over 35% of all the establishments in the country, and so Canada numbers tend to be in line with Ontario numbers for most things that I'm going to talk about. In terms of trying to find the people that you need, one thing that I always look at is rent, and because people are looking at what they're paying and what their expenses are going to be. This is the rents that are listed are the average 2023 rents supplied by the Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation. So they're certainly not the rents that you'll see today in the market, but they're all the same, pulled from the same to compare. And why I've done that is when I'm traveling around and you talk to people, like in Calgary, for instance, they'll say, "Oh my goodness, the rent's so expensive. It's gone up almost 20% in 1 year for the average rent for one bedroom." But when you look at the real dollar amount, that you can still save a lot of money moving from Vancouver to Calgary or moving from Toronto to Calgary. And you can also see that the vacancy rate in Toronto is higher than it is in Calgary. And so it helps position your local knowledge of the market where you're operating with what's out there. And I've also included the number of hours worked at minimum wage, just so that you can sort of get an idea, because there are employers, not in food and beverage manufacturing, I hope, but certainly employers that are out there that are paying minimum wage in Vancouver and Toronto and some of these communities. And so if you're looking for people, that your positions will be able to offer a better quality of life. And I've got an illustration of what I'm talking about. So I went on to Canada's Job Bank this morning. That's what the delay was, Jason, me sending you the presentation. And I found two jobs, one in Mississauga and one in Kitchener. They're both vacant right now. They're food processing laborer positions, no educational attainment required. I used a take-home pay calculator to figure out how much of that would be ending up in their pocket. And then because it's almost the end of 2024, I went on to a rental site and just got the same site provided the average rent in June 2024 for Mississauga and for Kitchener. And so you can see that there's quite a huge difference in terms of the quality of life that somebody would have if they're deciding between living in Mississauga or living in Kitchener and doing this sort of work. And just by going that, I think I said 100 kilometers, it's about that to Kitchener from Mississauga, that you're going to make almost $11,000 more a year in take-home pay by working in Kitchener in the same job, in the same industry. And neither of those jobs are paying minimum wage. And so when you're looking at how you can recruit, it's about leveraging the advantages that you have. And so every community in the country has advantages over somewhere else. And it's just about figuring out what those are and being able to tell people about them. One of the other things I find that people don't know, and I'm the same way. I can tell you how many hospitals there are in Ottawa. I don't know how many hospitals there are in Toronto. And so if I'm trying to recruit someone to my area, if I don't know that about Toronto, how would I expect someone that's coming from the Philippines to know, or from Indonesia or Thailand? So it's important that if you're in a smaller community, that people won't know the things that you know about it. So you've got to tell them what the rental availability is like, what the rent is. Is there a post-secondary institution nearby? Is there a hospital nearby? Because those are things that families want to know about when they're making decisions about where to live. And so these sort of calculations are really eye-opening for people when they realize how much better their life could be by moving into a smaller community. One of the other ways to attract people is by tapping into what interests them. And so the Working Together report is available on our website. I'll send a link to Jason to share with everyone after. And we'd asked about what the importance of solving social change and environmental challenges and how that mattered to each generation. And you can see that for Generation Z, it was 70%. And the question wasn't about they're expecting like Jason's cookie company to solve climate change or to eliminate poverty or anything like that. They just want to work at a place where the employers are aware of these larger challenges and doing something for it. And whether that's saying that we've got solar panels on our roof, or we have a green wall in the office, or we've got electric vehicle charging stations, or we're paying a living wage, or whatever you're able to do that says we're aware of these larger challenges and we're doing our bit to help make the world better. That really resonates with Generation Z and younger millennials. And even though it's like not a top concern for the other generations, it's still about half of them that said that mattered to them. So it's certainly a strategy that works. And there's lots of, I mean, there's a story of a packaging company that decided they would put in electric charging stations at their facility, and they gave out a rebate to staff that purchased an electric vehicle. And they said the news picked it up that they were doing that. They didn't expect that from a packaging company. And then they got free media coverage, and they had the best numbers for applications that they'd ever had that month. So there's tapping into some of this can really pay dividends. Then it's important to look at what other areas you're not tapping into. Just for context, I didn't include the slide, but there's an industry-wide labor shortage going on across the country. Ontario isn't feeling it as bad as the other provinces are, but it's certainly useful to be aware of, because there are other provinces that are trying to get people to move there and fill their vacancies as well. And certainly they'll be looking at people that have the skills that they're looking for. And we'd asked what pockets of groups that people are actively recruiting from. And you can see that workers over 50 years old, 1 out of 5 are recruiting from there. But that's a really valuable market to tap into, as there's more and more people looking for sort of semi-retirement employment. And if that's something that you can offer to your employees that might be nearing retirement age, and find a way to have it where they're coming in 2 days a week, or they're coming in for partial shifts, or whatever is going to work with the way that your production works. It's a way to not lose that institutional memory that your longtime employees have. It's also a way to engage with older workers that might have left some other industry. And food is something that always connects with people. And so whether that's you're taking on someone that just wants to learn how to brew beer, or how to cut a steak, or whatever it is that your facility is doing, there's some opportunity there to really plug some labor gaps. And the same with the persons with disabilities. I was at a conference earlier this month, and that cohort of people with disabilities that are outside the economy right now, not working in any job, but could be working, is the largest group like that exists in the country. And so finding a way to access that would really help in a labor shortage, especially in areas where there's low unemployment or a lot of competition for labor, which is why at Food Processing Skills Canada, we've just launched a new program called Foodability, where we've partnered with different charities that work with people with disabilities to help get them into the workforce, providing training and support for the people with disabilities, as well as for the employers, and creating a space where you can ask questions, learn about what supports you need, what supports are available, and how to have an inclusive workplace and integrate people with disabilities into your workforce. And so we've got a series of workshops that are coming. I'm just going to jump ahead of slides so that you can see where they are. There's one in Waterloo on November 8th. It looks like my screen's cut it off at the bottom, but there's a link there for how to sign up, or you can just go to the FPSC website or search Foodability, and it will pop up. But it's a full day training. There's no cost to attend. You'll get an overview in disability inclusion for your business about what the benefits are, but also how to handle it. And we did a session of this at our leadership summit in March, and it was really a lot of people found it quite engaging to be able to ask questions of the people that do this sort of work day in, day out, about either perceptions that they have about people with disabilities, or fears that they've got about how they're going to integrate them, and to really learn about what level of supports that are there, and be able to ask questions in an open discussion, a safe space where no one's going to say, "Oh, Kevin, you're a horrible person. I can't believe you'd even ask a question like that." That's where it's about eliminating the misinformation and letting people know what's going on. And so overall, through the program, there's There's training events, there's programs and courses and workshops which total over $15,000 of value, which is delivered at no cost to the employer. And you can get involved with it if you're an industry association. So FBO even could join, or Meat and Poultry Ontario, as well as HR professionals, employers, the disability community. It really is trying to give our sector the resources that they need to be able to address the labor shortage by including this huge cohort that's currently outside the workforce. And so I'd encourage everyone to sign up for Waterloo on November 8th, or if you can't wait that long and you want to try to get to Winnipeg for Friday, I'm sure you can sign up and make your way over there, especially if you're in Kenora and it's just not a big drive. So yeah, I think I've already covered all of that one. All the training that we do is based off our learning and recognition framework. If you haven't seen it before, it's a huge poster. If we have a printed version in our office, and it's as tall as I am, and there's basically 5 levels of the training. And so workplace essentials are skills that everybody needs regardless of where they fit in the workforce. Those are things like literacy, numeracy, emotional intelligence, communication skills, digital literacy. There's a lot more there. And so when we do training for the different levels, whether that's foundations, occupation, supervision, or supervisor management, all those workplace essentials are geared for the level of the people that are taking the course. So foundations are the skill sets that apply to people that are just entering the industry. Occupation is focused on those specific skills that you need for different industries. So whether that's baking or something, the example I always use is knife skills, which you wouldn't need in baking or dairy, but they're really important in meat and seafood. And then there's supervisory skills and management skills. And each one of the boxes you can see there has a whole slew of training and learning outcomes with each one. And it's a very useful tool as well to help people recognize the skills that they already have, as well as to help people that are coming in from another industry. So if there's someone that had been working in forestry or in the automotive sector and they'd been supervising people, you can match up the skills that they've already got and then bring them over. And it's kind of difficult to see on the screen, but there's an orange outline around a number of the boxes, and those are all boxes related to food safety. And so if you do have someone coming in from the energy sector, they won't have any food safety training. So it makes it easy to figure out what training they need to be able to work safely in the food space. We also have the Food Skills Library, which helps to small employers generate job descriptions, lists of competencies. It has the national occupational standards for a number of occupations. There's over 128 occupations in the Food Skills Library, and it's a really vital tool, especially given that in Ontario, over 50% of all of the food and beverage manufacturing employers have fewer than 10 employees. And so when you don't have your own HR person, having access to a powerful resource like this really saves a lot of time and lets you get on with the important task of making your products as opposed to worrying about some of the HR tasks. We also we've bundled the training, so there's 10 courses that you can see listed on the left. And these courses are available in 7 different languages: English, French, Mandarin, Russian, Punjabi, Tagalog, and there's one more that Spanish. And this program is available for Ontario employers, and they get all of the courses delivered in their own language, which really speeds up the integration. And as you can see, there's an example of the dictionary on the right. And so they get a hard copy dictionary, and you can see it's got industry terms that they're learning, as well as the equivalent term in their own language. And so instead of learning about, I need to take my umbrella to go to the library, they're learning about washing their hands or locking out and tagging out their machine, which are really, it's from speaking with Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada, having programs like this will speed up the integration of newcomers into the Canadian workforce by cutting the time almost in half from 6 months to 3 months. So it's a really valuable tool that employers can access to be able to provide training to their staff in their own language. And really having the dictionary and other resources eliminates what I've heard from some employers in other provinces where they don't have the program of trying to do conversations about safety and HR through Google Translate on the phone in the middle of the day, which is not an ideal situation for anyone. All of these programs are a big boost to retention. We just completed a program called Skills Training across Canada that was focused on supervisor training. And you can see the suite of courses and badges and micro-credentials that people would receive through the program. We've just launched Skills Training across Canada Frontline Worker program. And so it offers the same sort of suites of courses geared for frontline workers to be able to really show that you're investing in them and have them feel valued at the workplace, get the skills that they need to make your workplace more efficient. And so we've got some of the stats on that was that production rates improve when teams have taken the program. There's more loyalty, which helps with retention, improves leadership skills. It makes it easier to identify people that can be promoted up through the ranks. It helps with recruiting as well because it shows that you're investing in your employees. And we had the stat on the right, 94% of employees said they would stay when they invest in learning and training. And so we've seen all of those benefits from the employer side. And on the employee side as well, it builds their confidence. They get the micro-credentials that they keep so that they can keep track of their upskilling journey. It improves workplace culture. When teams take it together, I should add too that the training through this Stack program, all of the employees get Chromebooks so that they can do the training at home. And so we're not taking anyone off the line to do the training. And the Chromebook just means that if they were having to compete with their spouse that was going to watch Netflix or Disney Plus, or their child that wants to watch those things or do their homework or whatever, and if there was only one family computer, this takes that away and gives them a dedicated device where they can do the training. Employers are able to keep track of how quickly people are going through the training, and so that you can see, oh, Luis is really far ahead. He's only 2 courses from the end, and Kevin's only a third of the way through. So you can encourage Kevin to go, but we found that there's a lot of healthy competition between the staff as well on making sure that they get through the program. And then when everyone's completed, there's a recognition ceremony that takes place where we hand out certificates and really show off that people have done the training. And so it's fantastic program. And as well, you can see going back to the framework, people move through and see what skills they've got, and it helps them to envision a larger career in the industry instead of some of the perceptions that we see from people outside the industry where they think that there's no career to be had, which is certainly not the case. So that's my presentation. So I'm happy. I'm looking forward to the discussion and can answer any questions, but I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Thanks, Kevin. Seeing as we're a small group, feel free to raise your hand or ask Kevin a question. One question I had, Kevin, you talked about, and I think London did a pretty good job on this, on trying to attract people away from Toronto, talking about, the cost of living. For processors that are in the GTA, or because again, it's not easy to, pick up and move your plant and do that. Because you talked about every community has advantages. What's your recommendation that, companies that are in the GTA who, again, we're forced to pay that, or people are forced to pay the high rents. What are the things that you would encourage processors to highlight versus versus somebody who can say, listen, it's cheaper to work in Waterloo or London than it is in Toronto.
Yeah, I think that, well, there's certainly a lot of reasons that people like to be in Toronto. Access, there's more food options, there's more sports options, there's the general life in the big city, but there's also like the public transit in Toronto is, I know it's not everyone's favorite, but it's certainly superior to what we've got in Ottawa. And I would look at how people are getting to your facility. And so if you're located on a bus route or on the subway line or a streetcar line or whatever, to figure out how people can get to your facility without a car, and then target your recruitment in the areas along the stops on the route. Certainly, we've seen that as the GO transit expands, there's options. I think the Minister of Agriculture just announced funding for rideshare schemes and other transport options to help get people to the facility, because that's one of the pain points that I heard. I was speaking to some employers in Brampton, and they did a little internal audit to figure out where their staff were actually commuting from every day. And some of them were coming from really far away and spending almost 90 minutes on transit to get to and from the facility. And so if you're able to figure out how you can speed that up, that's a really an advantage. But again, like that, the average rents, when I'm looking at sort of the Toronto number, it's pulling the entire region. And
Sure.
certainly you can look at where areas that will have lower rent than downtown. I don't think anyone's going to commute from downtown to North York backwards or something like that, but trying to figure out where your employee base is, and where people also, like that example with Mississauga, where if you were just one person looking at that job and those rents, I wouldn't take it because I'm going to be losing money every month. And so if you're able to find, okay, so where can people afford to live to work in my facility, and target your recruitment there? And then I would just highlight all of the big advantages that Toronto already has. It's the place that people want to be. And so you have that population there. I don't think you really need to sell Toronto, but just figure out how best to position yourself to make yourself an attractive employer within Toronto, because your competition isn't as much the people outside as it is the other competitor down the street, because it's the areas, especially for food and beverage manufacturing, you're quite often located within a kilometer or two of at least three other competitors for the same worker.
Right, right. Yeah, we know companies that are using transportation services to help get their employees to, in Brampton, employees, and there's a great company called Hop-In Technologies that's helping. So that, I think processors are kind of ahead on that as well. On the my last question is you talked about the labor crisis we have across the country, and you said Ontario is faring better than the rest of the country. Do you have a figure on where, let's say, the number of positions that are open in Ontario at the moment? I know you did that years ago, but
Yeah.
is that something that you're able to share?
I haven't done an updated big survey, but so the survey that we did was in 2020, right at the start of the pandemic. And there we'd found that for Canada-wide, it was about 6 vacancies per employer. And in Ontario specifically, it was 2.5. In Alberta, it was over 10. And in Atlantic Canada, it was 9. And so certainly on that's where we noticed that Ontario was outperforming in terms of the number of vacancies that they had. Anecdotally, since then, like every survey that we've done, we've ended up with a vacancy rate of around 10 to 15%. And we found that the hiring challenge is equivalent today as to sort of where it was in 2019, that it's back to the normal labor shortage that we had before, instead of one that was sort of amped up by the pandemic. Yeah, it varies. Obviously, if you're in the GTA, there's more access to people, but also more competition. But yeah, that's something where Ontario's always sort of everything we've done with this, so specifically at the province, it's been doing better they've had fewer vacancies than other parts of the country.
Or thanks, Kevin. Any Gianna, thanks for joining us. Any other questions from anybody for Kevin? And we're going to share the presentation as well as the recording with everybody, so you'll have that. Kevin, last question for me. Sorry, I said that the last question was going to be the last question, but this is the last question, I promise. I've been hearing that food service, so the fast foods like the McDonald's, the Tim Hortons, and that there's been some movement from that sector to our sector. Is that true, or are you seeing that, or is that not a thing?
I don't have specific numbers on people jumping from food service across, but one thing that we'd looked at in the past was um, certainly we tried to see if there was a shift when the pandemic was on because like I'll use Mill Street as an example. Like they're running there, or they're already in the beverage, but there's a lot of brew pubs, like smaller craft brew pubs that were in the food service game and selling their beer at their pub. That when they couldn't sell at the pub anymore, they became beverage processors. And so
Right.
we tried to see, I've noticed that most of them have stayed in the market, whether that's supplying LCBO or doing just selling cans direct to consumers, as opposed to staying as much in the food service game. But we've seen a lot of it where people leave the wider food service industry. I've heard it more from restaurants and bars because people that have trained as chefs want to get more regular hours as they're starting a family to know that if their shift is going, from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., that they're going to get all of those hours. Where when you're working in hospitality, sometimes it's not a busy night at the restaurant, and you won't actually get the hours that you think you're going to get.
Right.
So there's a lot more stability in our industry, and it's one of the only places where people that have that food handling training or the know how to be food safe or have knife skills, like all of those things, it's a place they can transition and find that stable employment. So that's certainly an aspect I would encourage employers to, and we pay better than food service too. So there's that.
Right.
I will add too, just because I'd forgot to sort of highlight the role of TFWs, which is something that we're going to talk about. They're really important, especially for filling rural labor gaps. It's something where previous studies that we've done, we've looked at communities and seen sort of who's available in that area. And one of the ones that we looked at in Ontario was sort of that entire region, Guelph, Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloo. And we took everybody that was in that workforce and we asked all of this was specifically for meat processing, and said, who's available? Like, how many people do you need to fill up your facilities and work at full production? And they gave us a number, and we looked at the number of unemployed people that were in that region, and there was enough. And then we took the layer off of everyone with a university degree, and there was definitely not enough. And so it's trying to get that nuanced look because when you're putting a job out there, if you say university degree required or preferred, people that don't have one won't apply. And if you say nothing required, people with a university degree won't apply. There's no way to catch everyone and let them know what's going on. And so for our sector, there's a lot in the media about temporary foreign workers, but the reality is in food and beverage manufacturing, you're paying $1,000 to bring in one worker, just to apply to bring in one worker. If you're a unionized facility, that worker is joining the union, they're renting their own accommodation, they're not living in a bunkhouse behind the facility or anything like that. It's a completely different program than the one that operates in other sectors. And part of that application that you pay $1,000 for, it includes a labor market impact assessment, where you make the case to the government that you've posted the job locally, you haven't had anybody apply, there's nobody in the local area to fill the role, and you demonstrate that you've done that to the government, and then they approve it. So there's no opportunity with the way the temporary foreign worker program works in food and beverage manufacturing for you to bring in people and not pay them the prevailing wage. That's also a requirement. And so no one's going to come in and make minimum wage in food and beverage manufacturing because that's not the prevailing wage. And so it's a vitally important way to get people into to the country to do work that people don't want to do, or that there aren't available to do those jobs. And so, especially for the rural manufacturers where they're located just that bit further away, to get people when there's there's a labor shortage right now in Canada, like going back to that line I had about how the youth number hasn't changed, that's affecting everyone. And so all sectors are facing this same youth challenge. And so if I was just located, like if I had a fictional place in St. Thomas, people from London aren't going to come to St. Thomas to work for me because there's lots of jobs available in London, not necessarily in food, but in every sector. And so having programs where you're able to bring in people and train them with like Saw Language Stream or other programs to make sure that you're bringing in people. Like I've spoken with employers that go to the Philippines and are recruiting butchers through the temporary foreign worker program that are already trained butchers to bring in that sort of skill set directly to where it's needed is really valuable. So they're a big part of sort of the duct tape on the labor shortage. And the other aspect with TFWs for food and beverage manufacturing is that the program says temporary in it, but it's a permanent immigration program. The people that come through the TFW program will transition into Ontario's provincial nominee program and then get their permanent residency and then their Canadian citizenship, and they're staying and not going home. And our sector nationwide is made up of 40% of immigrants, which is significantly more than the economy as a whole. And it's a vital part of how the industry works. So that's my 2 cents on the TFW program.
Jason,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
are you okay if I ask a question regarding that?
100%, 100%.
Awesome. Just to introduce myself, and I apologize for being late. I was coming off another meeting. My name is Jayanna. I'm the talent acquisition manager here at Give and Go. Nice to meet you, Kevin. And if this was already said, I apologize. I'd be really interested because you talked a lot about the pool of immigration right now. That's being the fuel for our talent. A lot of conversation right now around obviously the immigration changes and that pool now being stripped or going to be stripped over a year or a year and a half time. You know, the foreign workers program is not always suitable based on the organization and the cost involved. So do you have any insight or suggestion on how any organization is going to navigate that, right? We're losing that key talent that was filling, certain pillars. We know in the market, there's gaps in terms of skill set, even with the domestic labor. What are you hearing in terms of how companies are either preparing or trying to fill that gap that isn't necessarily through the costed foreign worker program?
Yeah, there's far too many, I think, immigration programs, which is part of the problem too. I was speaking with IRCC about it earlier this month to just say, like, look, I'm not an immigration consultant. I said, but I deal with this and I know enough. And it's like, I have difficulty figuring out what the best way to get workers in. And this is something that I'm aware of and doing as part of my job. If I were a small manufacturer, like how on earth would I navigate all of these to know that, oh, I can access workers through the Francophone immigration stream, which is the fastest way to bring people into the country. But they need to be Francophone, and I highly recommend you have someone in your facility that speaks French if you're bringing in a lot of Francophones, and be prepared to integrate them into an English-speaking community if you're doing that. Or if you're in a Francophone
so there you go. You taught me something new.
Yeah. But there's so many different ways. One of the programs that FPSC is doing right now is that we're training Afghan refugees in Turkey with some of our suite of courses to get them ready to work in Canada. And we've partnered with a charity, the name's escaping me right now. They're affiliated with the Aga Khan Foundation. And they're sponsoring the refugees to come to Canada. So there's no, those people are coming. They're sponsored. They're going to come into Canada. And we're connecting. So what we've been doing with the first few cohorts, there's small groups, like 10 or 12 people. We'll train them. And then we try to keep them together as much as we can, whether that's going to the same community and partnering with multiple employers, or with the first cohort, I know they all went to one employer in Alberta that wanted the whole cohort to come together. And so there's programs like that as well that can help to bridge some of the gaps. But I mean, because I don't live the programs every day, I don't like, there's so many that are changing, but there's a lot of different ways. We've done a webinar, I think it's probably on our YouTube channel, where we looked specifically at immigration programs. We had an immigration consultant that was doing a boot camp, and she sort of ran through some of the gamut. But one of the things I remember that she said is, remember to look at what your responsibilities are, because she said quite often the wages that people are planning to pay for a temporary foreign worker is right around the threshold of high wage worker or low wage worker. But your responsibilities as an employer are different if you're bringing in a low wage worker or a high wage worker. And she said that often, in cases, she's based in New Brunswick, but she said often with employers that she'd spoken to, she'd seen that if they paid gave them a little bit more to put them above that high wage number, that because they don't have some of the same responsibilities as a low wage worker, they're actually out of pocket less money than if they were bringing in someone on a lower wage. So to look at the whole equation. But yeah, there's a number of programs, but I don't know how many are going to survive whatever sort of random tweaks seem to be coming all the time. But I'm doing my best. Jason mentioned at the intro that I'm on a lot of federal and provincial committees, and I'm always raising the issue of I don't care what you call the program, but there has to be some program to bring people in, because the food industry has to succeed. It cannot fail.
It'll suffer. Thank you for that.
Any other questions? Okay. With that, thank you, Kevin, for the presentation. That was great. As I said, we'll share that with everybody, the recording as well as the Kevin's slide deck. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us, and we hope to see you at our next one, which is November the 12th with Scaling Education.